All right, welcome to District Talk. I'm Chad McLaughlin of District Home Loans, your host. And this week, we welcome back Jon Tobery.
How you guys doing?
Realtor extraordinaire of the DMV.
Hey, now a regular on the podcast,
Yes,
right?
you are now a regular. This is your third time,
Yeah, I think it's
right?
the third appearance.
So that's awesome.
Is it like SNL? Do I get a jacket if I get to 5?
Oh, I don't know. We'll have to plan for something.
Yeah, I want that.
We'll do that.
I want Steve Martin to come in and congratulate me too. That would be awesome, right?
So, but yeah, well, no, seriously though, thank you for coming back, and we've had such great conversations that I wanted to have you back on.
Appreciate it.
And I appreciate you coming by because I know this is some time out of your schedule to do it, and yeah, I thought so this week. What I wanted to kind of dig into, so, in light of the recent NAR settlement, right, there's been a lot of talk about buyer agency, right?
Sure.
And I don't want to get into the NAR settlement this week because I think at this point, we don't know what's happening, right?
Yep. Billion questions,
There's
no
a
answers.
ton of speculation.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that think they know what's going to happen. But myself personally, and probably even, do you feel comfortable talking about NAR?
No, not in any way
so
whatsoever.
We're not. So right now, there's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen. But for this week, what I thought we could do, though, in light of the NAR settlement, is dig into buyer agency. That's basically the buyer's agents, and why it's important to have a buyer agent or buyer agency for representation.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I think we could start with the simplest point of buyer agencies started in the early 1900s. As far as America is concerned, I don't want to speak for anywhere else, but
okay.
And the reason was because the sellers were represented even then.
Sure. Yeah.
And the buyers were at the mercy of not having any type of representation. And of course, the sellers were making out better in those transactions because the buyer was just along for the ride.
Right. So what you're saying is because the seller had representation and had their agent basically helping them along the way,
right?
Who knows everything, who knows the ins and outs of a deal, if you will.
Right.
The person getting burned was the buyer.
Exactly, because the sellers knew, or the representation of the seller understood how the system worked or the game was played, whatever terminology you'd like to use there.
Yeah.
But the buyers had nobody looking out for their best interest.
Okay.
Right. And ultimately, in the way a transaction works today, there's a listing agent or the seller's agent, and there's a buying agent that is sometimes referred to as a selling agent, that is looking out for their client's best interest.
Right.
Period.
Right.
End of conversation. I owe both of you some fiduciary responsibilities of not sharing information I might learn during the process, and that is forever, by the way, not just during the transaction. That is for as long as I'm on this little ball circling the sun, right? So that's, those things are important, though, that somebody's looking out for your best interest. Mm-hmm. We were just kind of talking about this podcast and getting started and set up, and somebody brought court into play, and the idea of, would you go into a courtroom without a lawyer?
Right.
I wouldn't personally, right? And Chad wouldn't. So I think that's a good way to kind of start that conversation of, you want somebody on your side who understands, one, how the game is played, what the rules of engagement are, and also how things are working currently, today, next week, transactions don't work the same. How you might have bought a house in 2015 is not how you buy a house in 2024.
Right.
And that can change during 2024.
I mean, even contracts change.
Right. Oh my gosh.
I mean, the wording of contracts, I mean, I know just from experience, just how contracts were, they went from this big to back to this big.
Well, that's a great thing. So when I first started in real estate, there was one of the agents that was in my office had literally been in the business longer than I'd been alive. Right.
Yeah.
And I was already 40. Right. And so we're not talking about I was some spring chicken by any means. And she was telling us about the first contracts and how there was like a couple of pages.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, my God, I mean, the buyer agreement is more than a couple of pages there. And when I say buyer agreement, so there is in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, if we're going to talk about the settlements and those kind of things, I did not totally understand this because that's the region I work in. Again, I'm licensed in all three of those places, jurisdictions. But not everywhere has an exclusive right to represent documentation paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. And any of our DC, Maryland, or Virginia, there is the exclusive right to represent. There are some other documents that go in to make up the entire buyer agreement. Some of those are affiliated businesses, and then each jurisdiction has some different forms that go along. But the exclusive right to represent is part of all of them. And in each case, it talks about how commissions are paid, any fees that will be incurred by the client in those cases, and it basically lays everything out, what my responsibilities are as an agent, and then some of what your responsibilities as a client are.
Yeah. Well, and you bring that up, and here you are. We're talking about multiple addendums that we're not even to a point of buying a house yet.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we're talking about addenda that a buyer needs to know.
Yeah,
going into a contract that again, like we said, is this thick,
right?
And right off the
settlement
bat, you haven't even gotten to making an offer yet, and we're talking about signing addendums and what you could potentially say is a contract, right?
Yeah,
to a certain extent.
Right. I mean, terminology being what it is, right? We can split hairs about that, but ultimately the exclusive right to represent, or the buyer agreement, or a listing agreement for that matter, not that we're talking about that today, but is ultimately a contract between you, the client, and my brokerage.
Right.
It's not even me, which is, I am the person that is there to represent you and, quote, appointed by my brokerage, or you have agreed to work with. But it is because ultimately the money passes from brokerage to brokerage. That's how commissions are paid. And I think that is somewhat confusing to people.
Yeah.
I think people think that I walk out of a settlement and somebody hands me a briefcase with $10,000 in it or something, right? And that's not how it works. Currently, and we'll see how these things change, and that's why we don't want to talk about it, because I don't know. But currently, it would be an agreement of, let's say Chad's selling his house. He would make an agreement on the listing side that he is going to pay XYZ brokerage 5%, and then he also has agreed that brokerage is going to share 2.5% with the buyer's agent's brokerage, right? Mm-hmm. So then that money transfers. So at settlement, 5% would be taken out of the proceeds of the sale to go to the listing agent's brokerage.
2.5% to the listing agent.
And then the other 2.5% would be sent to my brokerage. So XYZ brokerage over here, ABC brokerage over there. And then at that point in time, I would get paid a percentage of that 2.5%, right? I'm still almost never receiving that full 2.5%. Even though people do believe they think that's actually the case. So I guess, while we're on that, let's touch a little bit on it. I don't want to get too far into those details.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
But at the same time, there's a lot of fees that come out of that. Whether to the brokerage, whether that's to insurance, because we have to carry errors and omissions insurance, right? I think you have something similar.
Yep.
And so all those fees come out. It depends on your brokerage type, what other fees may be involved with that. And then usually the brokerage takes a little cut because they are supplying the brick and mortar places that we work at, that we all have to hang our license in. So, they take
some marketing.
There's marketing and all the websites and the behind the scenes people that you'll never meet in part of a transaction that are hugely important because they're making sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, all that kind of stuff. They're also making sure just dumb things like we were just talking about licensing and some of that. Like my Maryland license just would have expired on the 11th of April. And, about 30 days out, I get an email saying, hey, this is coming, right? I did, fortunately, and was working on it, but still and we talk about that again as that continuing education is huge. You talked about laws changing. So it was my Maryland license in this particular case. One of the 6 modules or 15 credit hours that I had to take was legal changes in Maryland.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And of all the stuff, that was probably the most important thing because some of the stuff's repeat and kind of reminders of things you should, best practices and those kind of things. But that's hugely important that we're always up to date on what the latest law changes are. And that can be statewide. Sometimes it's in county, a specific county, so there's all those kind of things. I know I just talked about Maryland. There's a change in D.C. One of the smaller areas of D.C. that actually has some jurisdictional balance of its own has added an addendum. Loudoun County, actually, there's a not Loudoun County, but a part of Loudoun County has actually made a recent change to addenda to change highlighting that you're close to an airport.
Oh, wow.
Now, if you're buying in Loudoun County and didn't realize Dulles was there, I mean, I think there were problems to begin with, but regardless, they've added in an addenda.
Now, is that something, because I'm not obviously not experienced in this. Now, is that something that if I was a buyer, would I have to know that to be able to put that together as part of my contract offer? I mean, is that something?
Yes, it's a required form for certain areas, right? Okay. Not all of Loudoun County, even, right? Yeah, you have to be within a certain period or a certain area for that to be part of the contract. But yes, that would be something that would be part of a contract that you would need explained to you. So again, to kind of put that in the importance category, right? Do you want somebody who's representing you explaining something like that, or do you want somebody that's representing someone else explaining that to you, and their job is to sell the house for that other person?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not to protect you, to sell the house for somebody else. Right? Now, they have a certain level of honesty and things that they need to live up to as an agent, period, right? But at the end of the day, they're still representing somebody else. They may not get into why that is pertinent to you, right?
So let's kind of back up because I think we're kind of jumping ahead with the contract,
we did a little bit,
right?
Yeah.
So let's start with just getting started with a buyer. Where do you start? As a buyer agent, looking out for your new client.
Right. So we've done some of the basic things where we may
Yeah.
have already we've already had like a buyer consultation at this point in
Sure.
time. Just for reference points, so you understand what that is. That's when I want to sit down with you at my office, at a coffee shop, at the bar, at wherever that may be. Sometimes
Wherever.
we need to do that virtually, whether by phone or Zoom call, something like that. But that's a point where, one, I want to start to build some rapport with you, get an understanding of who you are. I want to start explaining the process to you, which can be different levels depending on your experience, right? What I have come to find is it doesn't matter how many houses you've bought, you still don't really remember it all, because it's not like you did it last month, you did it last year, you did it 5 years ago, you did it 20 years ago,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I used to look at it more as I treated first-time home buyers kind of as complete novices, and you've bought and purchased before, or you've bought and sold before. Okay, I've come to realize that nope, pretty much come at you exactly the same, because you don't remember it all.
Yeah. So when you're first meeting them, you're looking at, like you said, getting them to understand the process, kind of figuring out their wants and needs, and figuring out, well, obviously, and getting pre-approved.
Right. So so we've done the buyer consult. I think the next two important things are, one, we need to get you pre-approved.
Okay.
Because we've talked about this previously, of the myths of real estate.
Sure. Yeah, we did.
That online calculators are not. They're giving you a ballpark idea. They are not telling you what you can afford.
Right.
And a way to look at that is, an online calculator might lead you to believe you can afford $800,000, but once you add in the taxes, fees, and all the other stuff that goes into actual mortgage payment, or even just the actual purchase, maybe it's closer to $650. Right. Is the reality. So that's hugely important to get done. And then, yes, discovering what your real wants and needs are, and then getting you in the right frame of mind to decide what are even the most important of those.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you feel like if I was, your client coming in, or excuse me, if I was just, Joe Schmo looking on the internet, I've used my online calculators, and here I am, I'm looking at, like you said, $800,000 houses, and I'm so excited because, I'm looking at $800,000 houses. Then I go and get pre-approved on my own, and then I realize, I can only do $650,000.
Yeah. So I like how you framed that. So not only is that disappointing just in the idea of realities, right? It can be even more disappointing that if we didn't get the pre-approval before we started looking at houses.
Right.
So if you go out and you start looking at $800,000, $900,000 homes, and then the reality is I can only afford $600,000. Are you going to like any of those $600,000 homes?
It's going to be tough.
Right.
And had I probably had somebody there to help me along the way, I probably would have realized that off the bat. Right.
You would have never had that disappointment.
Right.
Of wow, I really want this, that kitchen, that bathroom, that whatever that is going to come with that quote more expensive home than what is actually in the budget.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing as a car.
Yeah.
Right.
You brought up something earlier today that I wanted to mention now, that I think kind of goes along with what we're talking about, and it was the DC creep.
Yeah. So
Can you explain what the DC creep is?
I do have to be fair. I did steal this from another agent in my office, but I think it was a great way of looking at it. I think he just put a nice term on it, right? Is that if you're, particularly if you say you're moving to this area and you're kind of unfamiliar with the market, you can come in with what you think is a very healthy budget where you live now,
Right.
and find out that is not a very healthy budget in our area, right? And we
Yeah.
do live in an expensive area. I get that. But I think what the DC creep is in that way is that you either end up creeping up in your budget, right? So we really only wanted to spend 600 and now we're spending 750 or 8, right? And that
Yeah.
means your mortgage payment is more expensive per month, or you start creeping further away from the city.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So both of those things can occur. And sometimes that's what needs to happen because you discover that, okay, my wants and needs list, what was really the most important, right? And if travel time is the most important to you, maybe you get a house that fits your budget, but the travel time is less,
Right.
right?
Right.
Maybe you're willing to travel further. And now that budget, if we take it out from, from Alexandria to Woodbridge or from Bethesda to Frederick, now all of a sudden I can get you close to what your wants and needs are, but now you got to drive
But
an
I gotta
hour.
drive. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I like that. I thought that was a pretty clever
Yeah,
term.
I do. I really did. Like I said, I'm stealing it from somebody.
That's
but,
right. Hey, that's
but
all right.
that's life in a lot of realms, right? You hear something, you use it for you.
So the buyer's agent is going to help you get pre-approved. They're going to help you figure out your budget. They're going to help you understand the process, figure out your wants and needs, and kind of really kind of iron out all
Well, and
of those.
how's the market working also right now?
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Because we talked about this a little bit earlier. I used the example of my sister is a professor,
Right.
and I didn't realize how much data they actually used with their students, right? And I would have no idea how to interpret that data because it's not my expertise. It's not. I don't know what they're even looking for, what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So on the other side, real estate has a lot of data. And now I feel like everybody thinks just because they can find it on the internet that they're now an expert in some topic. And the reality is you still have to interpret the data.
Yeah.
Right. And so I look at that as one of those things of that's how you discover how the market's working to some degree. And it may not be you may not be interpreting it in the way that is telling you the real story. So that's where that agent can help you understand that, yes, prices are going up, and maybe you can tell that from the data right now. Maybe you can't, but maybe I know they're not just going up in little, like say in a new home community where, okay, you built 5 townhomes, the next 5 are now 15,000 more, right? It's pretty straightforward,
Right.
kind of thing. I might be able to tell you, oh no, they're jumping by, and we just went through COVID. This is a perfect example of, no, that's jumping $50,000, $70,000.
I think that leads right into what our next benefit to having a buyer's agent is, and that's structuring a deal.
Right.
Because you know the market, right? And you know where they're looking now at this point. You know what their wants and needs are. We've already kind of got that under the belt. And here we are. We've looked at houses that's in their budget, that's in their price range, and they're ready to make an offer, right? And the market data, like you said, is going to help structure a deal to win.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think people look at it as it's all about, quote, cash.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, yes, a lot of it does boil down to just the dollar figures of it all. But there's other things that can make your contract strong that are outside of that, like the contingencies. So the contingencies at the end of the day protect buyers, but are risks to sellers, right? Because all of those are ways that the buyer may get out of the contract for good or bad, right? That's going to be situation to situation. But the reality is that the more contingencies a contract has, the more risky it is, the less favorable it is for the seller.
Right.
So sometimes it isn't about offering $15,000 more, $20,000 more. Maybe keep that $20,000 in your pocket and waive a home inspection.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to advocate for waiving home inspections. I'm a former contractor. I want you to know about the houses, right? I always would want you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But if you're in a very competitive market, sometimes that's what you have to do to win the house, right? And notice that term, win the house.
Yeah.
It isn't just making offers.
Yeah.
Right? You're in competition. That's why we use that term. You are in competition if there are multiple offers on a home, which means you have to figure out a way to win if that's the home you really want to buy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so I can help you understand how to craft that offer to win, but also what are the risks for you now, right? Because if you're giving up a contingency, you're creating a risk for yourself.
Right.
Right. So I think there's a lot of things that people don't quite take into account. And we were talking about some examples of this earlier, and I could use this particular example in a lot of different ways, but I had a client who was not from America, and they had been here a while at this point in time, but were going to actually purchase their first home. Great job, money, like we're solid people. I mean, solid people all the way around. Really love them as a family in truth, right? I've been to some other celebrations of theirs over the years now, but they had just met me. I was just a guy, right?
Yeah.
A licensed real estate agent, but at the end of the day, just a guy. And so they were also getting advice from a relative who had been here a number of years longer, had already purchased a home, and they were offering them advice that meant they would actually never win an offer.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't want to get into the details of that as much as they had bought a house previously in 2015, 16, whatever
Years
year
ago.
it was.
Years and years ago.
Right?
Yeah.
And a market can change in the year.
Yeah.
Right? Conceivably, every year the market should be stronger.
And markets are different by zip code.
Well, right, yeah, right. Even more location and everything else. Right. Yeah.
Even if they just bought like yesterday,
right.
If they're looking at another zip code, it could be completely different experience than what this other family member had gone through.
So I mean, just making the point that a market can change in an April market in 2024 might be different than the November market.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't guarantee you that right now, but I would put my money on it if you made me bet.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's clearly different from 2015 to 2024.
Yeah.
Right? For all kinds of different reasons. Where's the interest rate at? What's the supply look like, right? Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this. Real estate is complicated and super simple depending on what part of it you want to look at. Right now. There aren't enough houses for people to buy.
Yeah.
So demand is higher than supply, right? This simple economics 101, right?
Basics.
Like you do not need a degree in anything to comprehend that if there's more people willing to buy it than there are things to buy, price going up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we've been in that for a long time. Great statistic on that is in the last decade, we've created 17.2 million families or more families. We've only built 10 million homes. That's a nationwide statistic, right? Not just for the DMV, but at the end of the day, it illustrates pretty well that we have more people for homes than we have homes.
Right.
Well, the price is going to keep going up. So that's one of those things to understand. But that's a macro level discussion of it, right?
Yeah.
What's your real estate agent and for your buyer agency in this way, they understand it in the micro. They understand that zip code or that county or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend I know what's going on in Cumberland, Maryland. No clue. Don't work out there, right? Not my cup of tea. Don't know.
Right.
West Virginia. Don't know, right?
Yeah.
But you get me anywhere in the DC metro, and I look at that as a fairly wide area,
That's a pretty big
right,
area.
for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty confident, and I can tell you what's going on and how things are working in that particular area, and help you get to the right kind of offer
and structure the deal to win, like you said.
Right.
Structure the deal to win.
Right.
So once you've structured the deal, you've gotten an offer accepted. Now,
but let's step back even from there. One just little step.
Yeah.
Is we've structured a deal. We've submitted our offer.
right. Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're going to accept it just how it sits.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. So, there's still some negotiating.
Right.
From
There can be negotiation right at that point. Right. There may or may not be. I mean, it depends on the transaction. Like, they're all different, right? They are snowflakes by all means, right?
Sure.
But there could be negotiation even from there, because we're real close to winning, but maybe we need to give on one other thing.
Sure.
Okay, well, maybe we give on that and ask for that.
Yeah.
Or maybe we just accept, we'll give on this little thing, or maybe the whole thing could get blown up.
Yeah, because
right
it's not
there,
like
right?
you're going to, I mean, at the end of the day, you're the buyer's agent, you're going to structure a deal. That doesn't mean that deal is going to be, you know, accepted.
Right, they're just going
Don't
to
get
put
me
their
wrong.
signatures on there, and we all move along happy.
Right,
you know?
right. There's still going to be some negotiating from that point.
Yeah. Usually there's
Okay.
negotiation just to get to the ratified contract.
Okay.
Right?
So I guess I'm assuming that once you have that ratified contract, it doesn't end there, right?
Exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
that's kind of where I was going, because
Right. And I knew I kind of felt like that's where you were going. So I was like, well, let's get this other negotiation period in too.
Yeah, there's still negotiating. There's negotiating going on throughout. I mean, really throughout the entire process, right?
Right.
Because you're negotiating your wants and needs to a certain extent. If you think about it, you're negotiating your own self.
Right. Oh, yeah. I think it's a great way of saying it.
So,
At the beginning, yes, you are. You're negotiating with yourself when you're looking for the home.
Right.
Whether it's just you or you and your partner or whatever it is.
Right.
There's some negotiation
still
through
gonna
all
be,
of that.
There's going to be some back and forth.
Us.
There's back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've gotten the deal done. You've gotten, let's say the deal, the contract is done. You have a ratified contract, ratified meaning all parties have signed, right?
Yes.
So, but it doesn't end there.
No. I mean, so let's assume we have contingencies, right?
Yeah.
It's not a cash offer. There's a loan involved.
Contingencies, when you say contingencies for our listeners, you mean something like contingency meaning you've got to get a home inspection.
Yep.
Right? Or there may be a mold inspection, or there may be something specific that you want, that you've requested that's part of the contract.
Right. We can maybe speak of it from the property inspections.
Okay.
Right. As opposed to specifically a home inspection.
Okay.
So if we look at it as property inspections, just in that way, we're talking now a home inspection, which is really structural and mechanical inspection. Right. And that's home inspection is kind of the term that everybody knows. It's kind of like I can blow my nose on plenty of pieces of paper, but we all call it a Kleenex,
right?
Even though that's a brand name, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So a home inspection kind of is the structural and mechanical inspection. So that's like your foundations, your roofing, shingles, your how your HVAC system is running, your appliances. Those kind of
your
things.
Basics.
Yeah, your basics of the house, right?
Right.
But then, like you said, there's mold, here's another one. We call it a termite inspection. It's actually a wood-destroying insect inspection, to be truthful, right? Because termites are not the only insect that can mess up your home. So there's the mold, the wood-destroying insect. There's radon, depending on the situation. And then oh my gosh, let's say it's not a house that's sitting in a community setting on public services or public utilities, right?
Ooh,
So now we
yeah.
get into the septic and the well,
Yeah.
and then okay, the well works, but is the water okay? So now we should do a water condition.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that are involved just in quote what we all refer to or gets referred to as the home inspection, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
a much bigger list of things.
So contingencies, meaning we'll just say home inspections, but we just went through all the things that could be part of that.
Right.
What happens when one of those inspections doesn't pass?
Oh, now we got a problem.
Then you got a problem, and
Right.
now you're going to go back and you're going to negotiate. Because let's be fair, the buyers probably still want the house.
Yeah.
The sellers still want to sell the house.
Right.
So who's going to be the one negotiating for who, and who's going to be the one that's making out?
Exactly. Right.
Because one of the parties is probably not going to be happy with either outcome unless you can figure out a fair.
Yeah. Most likely sometimes it's a pretty straightforward thing. Like,
Okay.
go put a new light switch up there, or even sometimes it's a light bulb.
That's a little thing,
right?
That's
right.
a little
so
thing.
there can be like nuanced nothings,
Yes.
right? Or they can be major issues
Right.
that aren't so major that we're just voiding the contract and walking away, right?
Right.
Because there are some times where, hey, Chad, let's get the heck out of here.
Yeah, this is a trap.
Like, there's no, we're not doing this one, right? But let's say it's something that's fixable. But how do we come to an agreement on that? Well, me personally, I again come from a contracting background. I have a pretty good sense of ballpark, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to put an exact number on unless you get a professional to come out and get there and give you a true estimate. But we can put together and say, okay, there's 40 things on this home inspection list. And I just said 40 things, right? That's every house, right? No house. Very few houses
will pass with
have just
have nothing.
one or two things on the report.
Yeah.
Normally we're talking 30, 40, 50, 60 things on a list.
Yeah.
Now the level of importance of those things,
right.
here to there, right?
Well, and I
They're
think too,
greatly
it's
different.
fair to say that these home inspections are to make you aware of.
Yes.
It's
They're
not
for
so much to say
informational purposes.
no, you shouldn't buy this house, or no,
Yeah.
this is it's basically say, oh, here, by the way, your downspout is not correct, or
Right.
this,
Or there should be a 4-foot extension.
some of this
onto
stuff can
that
be
or
fixed
whatever.
very easily.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just buying a piece of tube from Home Depot
Yeah.
and calling it a day, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, that stuff all has value.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's how do we package the right things together to entice the seller to just make the repairs. Right. So, for instance, just as an example piece, okay, we found one kind of big plumbing thing. All right. We would definitely want to get that repaired. I'm trying to think of a good plumbing thing. The hot water heater doesn't have the expansion tank on it. Okay. So it's important.
That sounds important.
Yeah, we've seen these videos on YouTube or whatever your social media thing is of a hot water heater blowing up and shooting through the roof, right? So, those things do happen. They're very, very rare, but my gosh, they make it everywhere. If it does happen, that's on your nightly news too. So let's say it doesn't have the expansion tank, but we also have a drip under the sink in the kitchen. The valves are so the water lines are switched on the bathroom upstairs. So when you turn on the hot, the cold comes out, and you turn on the cold, the hot comes out. There's all these, and some of those are just some nickel and dime issues beyond this bigger thing of the expansion tank.
Yeah.
Okay, let's package that all together. You already got the plumber coming out. Fix this $700 worth of stuff and let's move on.
Okay.
Right. Or it can be major issues of, and again, major, let's keep that term loose, because a major issues is they're cracking a foundation and let's get the heck out of here.
Right.
But there can be bigger issues that are coming together of they're not actually affecting how you use the home on a daily basis, but they are issues, or they don't meet code today, but they did in 2010 when that was actually done.
Yeah.
Right. So those are ways to, do we want to argue about this and get it fixed? Do we want to seller credit?
So I was just going to say, let me play devil's advocate, because I'm the buyer, and why do I need the buyer's agent to negotiate this stuff for me? Because couldn't I just go and say, fix this and fix this and fix this? Or
you could, and then the deal falls apart, and now you're sitting there and you don't have a home, and maybe you need to be in a house by next month,
or maybe I didn't negotiate right.
Yeah, right.
And maybe I negotiated on all the wrong things.
Maybe you came out too strong, right? I mean, because here's the deal: is you always have to put your feet in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
There's 40 things on a list. Every agent, and most sellers, because they've been through this process on both sides, most likely, right? Because they purchased that house, right? So unless it was brand new, they went through the home inspection process and did all that. If you ask for all 40 things on the list, I can tell you what I'm going to tell my client. If I'm the listing agent, tell them to go pound sand right now.
Yeah.
Right. We're not going to fix all of the things.
Yeah.
So if you come out with an unrealistic ask, sometimes you're not going to get to the point. Just like say it isn't a complete seller's market and you're going to offer less than asking price, right? So let's say asking price is 500 and you come out of the gate offering 350.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Now, while I understand dickering, right, or that kind of negotiation, it isn't a rusty car sitting in the front yard that you want to refurbish.
Right.
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 So if you come out at a ridiculous starting point,
you're not going to be taken seriously.
Right. The people don't look at you as being legitimate because you're not being serious.
Yeah.
Right. And I, believe me, I have clients who do that want to fancy themselves as seasoned negotiators and then come out with a ridiculous starting point. No, let's come in somewhere where we're taking on the fact that everything, to get back to the home inspection, that everything on this list is not a serious problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because many times a lot of the stuff is not really that important.
And it's probably something that's in a lot of homes. So,
like
if you pass it up on this, I mean, you're probably going to find it in the next home that you.
I mean, let's just use Maryland as an example. Carbon monoxide smoke detector is required, right?
Yeah.
Now, whatever it is, a 10-year battery has to be part of that. It's not in the house. The seller says, no, I'm not going to install it, but you need it probably for the loan. The underwriters are going to require it, right? Mm-hmm. But are you going to let the deal fall apart over $40?
Right.
Right? Just because the seller's being unreasonable.
Right.
That's not a reason to not buy the house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There are serious reasons to not buy a house, but that's where having somebody who's not emotionally involved helps in negotiating, right? Because the listing agent and the buyer's agent, we're part of a business transaction, right? I'm not going to live in the home. Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't care. I care about my client. Sure. I want the best for them, but I also have realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Because I understand how this works. This is not my first rodeo, my third rodeo, my 20th rodeo. It's my whatever.
Right.
So I'm aware of what are the real issues and what are they not, and I can help you understand what to truly ask for so you get what you want. Mm-hmm. Maybe even more importantly, you get what you need, right? Because getting what you want isn't always how life works.
Yeah.
Right?
So are there any other negotiations that you think come up outside of, like, let's say, home inspections and things of that nature? Like, I mean, even coming, like something that comes to mind for me is, like, happened to me recently, is negotiating just the settlement date. I mean, something something like that. Like, like you have to go back and, I mean,
sometimes that could be a real
something
back and forth.
as simple as that,
Yeah.
or
Well,
like we talked about earlier, rent back. Negotiating that aspect for the
so
client.
we're in a more seller oriented market right now because they are still holding the cards for all the interest rate hikes in the world. There's still more buyers who want to buy the house than there are houses on the market.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So sellers are still being able to ask for, and I do have a situation right now that I'm working with where the seller has asked for, or has said that an end of June date for settlement would be ideal. Well, we're in, what is today? April 18th.
We're in April, yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's already an extended settlement date, right?
Yeah.
Generally, just again for the consumers out there that are watching this, generally we're talking about 30 days,
right,
give or take, right? Sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower, and that can be for both buyer or seller's benefit, depends on the situation and what we're dealing with, but somewhere close to 30 days. Well, the end of June that's 2+ months, right? That's a long time, and asking for a seller rent back or a buyer rent back
into July.
Yeah, so for another month.
So in other words, your folks aren't going to be into their house until late July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they were to make an offer on that house and accept everything the seller is requesting.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to have to negotiate that in this particular circumstance that we were talking about earlier, because Chad is helping that client on the loan side. We're going to have to negotiate something. They need to be in the home sooner, right? So we're going to have to figure out what,
or they need funds to be able to live somewhere.
Where else?
In the meantime.
Right. So that is kind of what we're talking about. Of if they give on all of that time frame, they need to get something back.
Yeah.
Right. And that maybe that's cash, maybe whatever. We can figure that out because there'll be other things to negotiate throughout the process. But yeah, that's a problem right out of the gate and something that we need to deal with. I'm not sure where we go with that one quite yet, because we have to figure out what all the needs are.
That's TBD.
Yeah, that one.
You all have to come back and listen to a future. We'll follow up on that.
Hopefully, a few months from now, if that's where this one goes, we can tell you.
But the bottom line then is that negotiations are going to continue even after you have written a contract and you have a ratified contract between both parties. Negotiations are going to continue.
Well, we talked about the contingencies, appraisal.
The appraisal,
right? Yeah. That's another one that can be very sticky.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just going to use numbers again for this, but let's say we've agreed to buy the house for $800,000. The appraisal comes back at $750,000.
Mm-hmm.
We have a $50,000 gap between agreed upon sales price and the appraiser said it's worth $750,000. So that now means that the lender is only going to give you $750,000.
We're only going to,
What are we going to do from there, right? And there's negotiation things there too. Mm-hmm. There's ways we can work the system to make it work for you. A lot of times if I'm just going to play pure strong arm for you, then my client will pay $750,000.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now that's in a stronger arm situation and my client is willing to walk away from the home. My client's not willing to walk away from the home and I go pure strong arm tactic. I could blow up a deal that there is a way to get to the finish line with that both parties can be happy. Yeah. Right? But that's going to take some finesse. That's not coming out with the sledgehammer. That's coming in with the scalpel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To figure out how do we make this work? And normally, again, that is going to be an easier conversation if I talk to my client, my buyer, and the listing agent talks to their seller. Us, and then you have a conversation.
You and the listing agent
go back to our parties and go, we're kind of here.
This
what
is where we're at.
something maybe work like this, whatever that may be. I don't want to put a real detailed
because again,
thing
at
out
the end
there.
of the
But
day, the listing agent's not going to be looking out for your best interest. If
No,
you're
listing
the
agent's looking out
buyer,
for them.
you're not looking out. Yeah, you're not. They're not looking out for your best interest.
Right.
All right, so we've talked about the importance of a buyer's agent in multiple aspects, right? So we've talked about from the beginning stages where you are helping them get pre-approved and figuring out their needs and wants, and really just helping them understand the process of what a home purchase looks like. Right.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I don't want to interrupt your recap here too much.
No.
But when we talk about the idea of helping you discover your wants and needs and those kind of things, there are many times where having somebody who you trust just say back to you what you've said to them.
Like you repeat it back to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's really what I'm doing, is reminding you of what you told me to start.
Yeah.
It's fine if we change course.
Yeah.
We can turn around, do a 180 and go
because
back down the road.
you're the one you're not the emotional one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're not the emotional one in the mix.
And on that point, I literally have a client under contract right now who's in Germany, and it was a very complicated way we finally got to a ratified contract. I'm not going to try to tell that whole story too much. But
yeah, because we don't have much time here on this podcast.
Right. Either way, we are almost there. All my client has to do is initial a couple of things and sign one more document, and we are now officially ratified. And then all the stuff, all the emotion of the things they had been through over the 2 weeks that it took us to get there was now boiling up. And the wife said it to the husband. The husband was already thinking it. And you know what they did? They called me on Sunday morning and go, blah, 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 blah. John, we're calling you because I know you can help us walk through this. And basically they just needed me to bring them back to reality. Back to a peaceful state of mind.
Sure.
Because they knew they were allowing themselves to go down the rabbit hole, let's say.
Sure.
Or get on the hamster wheel, maybe is a better metaphor in this case. And basically I just helped them go, we'll just stop walking, come over here, listen to this, and boom, we had a ratified contract. We're off and rolling.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's it, and that leads us to, so from getting pre-approved and looking at budgets and understanding the process to, of course, understanding their wants and needs. And it sounds like you understood their wants and needs, right? And
Very
you
much so.
You brought them down to
let's get back to what was the original point.
Exactly.
Right. You can be annoyed about these things, and it's not my job to tell you whether you're right or wrong.
Right.
In this case, I'll tell you they were right to be kind of worked up about how we got there. But at the end of the day, does that matter? Do you want to buy this house or not?
Yeah.
Right. And I helped him just kind of, it was I no longer was wearing the real estate hat or the home inspector helping you get through that negotiator hat. I was now wearing the psychology hat.
Yeah, and you bring that up, basically negotiating, so you negotiated the contract, you negotiated after the fact for them.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That brings us to our last thing, though. What about when the unexpected occurs? So we've talked about like some. Obviously, you're negotiating through things that are, like you said, contingencies. So we talked about, the home inspections and the multiple home inspections, not just, I'm saying home inspection, but we mean like everything that could be
all
involved.
The all the possible
that can be there.
That are there. Appraisals and,
the appraisal
and financing and all the
kind
things
of stuff.
that go into it.
But what about just like when the unexpected occurs? Like what happens then? Like what value does a buyer's agent bring when something happens that's outside of just all those typical
right. So we've talked about a lot of things. Chad and I will just chat randomly throughout the week and whatever else, right? Because we are friends outside of this business relationship. But so there's all kinds of things that we were talking about, contingencies and the things that are more directly related to the contract. Meanwhile, while those things are going on, and what I would say to a buyer is, okay, so we're doing these things, and the lender and the title company are doing a lot of things behind the scenes, right, that are also ultra important,
Right.
right?
Right.
But they're happening without our, I don't want to say not without our direct knowledge. We know they're occurring, but it's not something that's right here in our face, so to speak, right? So, you can speak to your lender side of that stuff, even though I have a fairly good handle on what he's doing, right? And that also helps because sometimes the buyers don't really understand what you're doing, right? But this particular example I'm going to bring up for unexpected was a title company issue. One of the big things that the title company does is making sure that the deed is coming to you what is referred to as free and clear. That means it doesn't have any liens against it. There's not some covenant issue that is outside of the norm.
Basically, the deed is basically what it makes it. You're owning that free and clear, right?
Right.
So there's no. It's a clean deed, like you said.
Right. That there's no outstanding issues on that deed other than there is always the quote lien of
Sure,
that the mortgage company or the lender that you used is kind of a co-owner of said home, right? Until you have paid that off, until you don't owe any money, right? But that's a normal thing. We all expect that to be there, that that previous loan is going to get paid off when you purchase it, right? That's part of those funds that you're providing, right? So when the house is sold for $700,000, if they still owe $500,000, that first $500,000, boom, that's where it goes, and then any profits go to the seller and any other fees, taxes, commissions, yada yada that go into it. What happened in this particular case is all of a sudden we're very close. We've negotiated all kinds of things in this particular home that I'm thinking of, even to the point that there were a few items that my buyer client wanted that were just personal property.
Oh, wow.
Of the seller, right? We even helped negotiate some of that in a very roundabout way, right? Because that wasn't really my job as the buyer agent or the listing agent's responsibility. But we did help facilitate that part of the process. And then all of a sudden, title pops its head up and goes, "Oh, we have a problem." And we're like, "Okay, right? How do what's the problem?" Well, in this scenario, the seller obviously had bought this home from someone else.
Right.
Somehow in the sale of that home, or when that sale occurred, in that transaction, somehow basically the right box didn't get checked when the deed went to the county, and it was showing as if there was a loan from 2 owners ago that had not been paid off. Okay, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do with this? Now, we all know that in this particular case, there was some simplicity to it of, we know that there is no way that this home got sold to the next buyer, who is now the seller, without that previous loan being paid off from that seller before her. Well, we can't prove it right this second, though.
Yeah.
There's no way that didn't occur, but we need to prove it for this deed to be truly free and clear, right? So this was a situation where it was very bothersome for my buyer, first-time home buyer in America. Right?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So not only was it a first-time home buyer, but it was also the process of buying a home in America was completely brand new to them. So they were very scared when we got this information. The title company was excellent. They really handled their part of it and didn't bring it to us as it was a catastrophe. Yeah. Which was greatly appreciated, right? They could have crushed the deal almost in their
Could've
own
been
right
worse.
if they had brought it in the wrong way. But they brought it to us. They explained the situation thoroughly. And then I dealt with the real estate attorney from the title company so I could get a full understanding from somebody who was truly a legal mind, right? I then was able to talk to my client, explain it to them in a thorough way. We even had some three-way calls with the real estate attorney because there were some things that I wanted him to explain from the legal standpoint
Right.
as
So
an
basically,
attorney.
so you as the buyer's agent, you are looking out for them, and you're reaching out to the title, and you're saying like, "Hey, like, let's figure this out. Let's help me explain this to my buyer."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. In the best
and you help
way.
facilitate.
While I understand it, you are the expert
Right.
now, right?
Right.
So we got together and helped explain it to the buyer, and there were certain things that were on the title side to explain, and there were certain things that were on my side to explain as the buyer agent. But what ultimately occurred was we still had to negotiate. Right? And figure out how to make this work for both parties. We knew it was a fixable problem.
Right.
We didn't know how long it would take to fix. We didn't know exactly what steps it would be needed.
Yeah.
We did know that there was an ultimate card to be played of going to that county's legal system and have a judge basically declare
Oh, wow.
that it was a free and clear deed, right? But ultimately, we needed the seller to do certain things. So for my client's protection in this process, we could have walked away and signed everything and gone to settlement and monies transferred and keys and the whole thing, but my client wouldn't have been protected. And ultimately, that's all I care about, right? I need my client to be okay. Seller's not my problem, you know. Don't get me wrong. Ultimately, I want to get paid.
The lender is not your problem.
Right? The lender's not my problem.
Yeah.
But there's those things. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I need to make sure that my client is going to be taken care of. And so between dealing with my client, the real estate attorney, and then the listing side between the agent and the owner of the home, we eventually came to an agreement that meant that we held, I forget the exact amount of money, but X amount of cash in escrow that the settlement company held in a non-interest bearing account that was going to be there basically as a carrot.
Yeah.
To make sure the seller did what they needed to do to get us to a free and clear deed, right? We still did settle on the home. My clients needed to move in. They were in a rental situation at the time, so they had extended a little bit, but they couldn't just keep doing that. So they needed to move in at some point. So we were able to go to settlement, do all the money transfers. The house was now theirs, but we had a fail-safe that we were holding this chunk of cash that made the seller want to do the rest of the work. And if the seller didn't do it, now we could take that cash, my buyer would get it, we'd hire a lawyer and get the problem taken care of that way.
And let's face it, and basically why the whole point of this, right, is that you were able to negotiate this escrow holdback where a typical buyer that was not represented, that didn't have representation.
How would you even know that was a
possibility?
possibility?
They wouldn't even have known. Right?
Yeah, that
exactly.
we could go to settlement.
Right.
The house could literally be yours in all legal terms.
Right.
Except for this one little thing that just needed to be worked out through the processes
and
that need to happen.
It goes back to what we talked about earlier. I mean, just negotiating. Like you said, you're working on their behalf.
Right.
Right.
And sorry, it just made me think about describing. Yeah. I mean, I feel bad at interrupting you, and then I don't. It's just Chad. I know this guy, right? So
Go for it.
but what people need to understand is that while the real estate attorney helped us facilitate this negotiation and come up, even provided me with exact legal language for the addendum, because this was well beyond John's scope as a real estate agent's
Sure.
writing up an addendum. Okay, if I need to include that the buyer is going to give us $1,500 or the seller is going to give us $1,500 in lieu of repairing X, yeah, I can handle that. Right. But we were talking about a major legal issue here. We needed real legal verbiage. But the real estate attorney was willing to provide that. But what you need to understand is the real estate attorney is an uninterested third party. They are not representing the buyer. They are not representing the seller. Now, in our jurisdictions that we work, well, you do some stuff outside
Multiple,
of that.
yeah.
But in DC, Maryland, or Virginia, it is the buyer's right to select the settlement company. Right, who the real estate attorney works for. Even though it's their right, that person does not work for the buyer.
No.
They are an uninterested third party who is just there to conduct certain parts to get us from ratification to settlement table and closed transaction and the transfer of ownership of this home. That's what they're there for. So they would not have just provided this extra work or consultation, I guess is really the word I'm looking for. They wouldn't have just provided this to a buyer.
Yeah.
Right? It was because I, as that buyer's representation, understood how to negotiate with the listing agent, and then the real estate attorney helped with their part.
And you knew who to go to. That's the thing. Like it's yeah. So I feel like we've touched on quite a few benefits as to why a buyer's agent is important to a transaction,
right?
And why, in light of, like we talked about earlier, in light of the NAR settlement or NAR settlement, like why it's important to continue to consider using a buyer's agent as part of transactions.
Absolutely.
Just a couple of things that we touched on, again, just coming back through it. So we talked about, or you talked about, I should say, a buyer's agent is going to know your budget. They're going to know your wants and needs and where to look for, how to negotiate, how to structure a deal to win that deal.
Right.
What happens when the unexpected occurs, just like what we just talked about. So there's a lot of opportunity for a buyer's agent to be beneficial to a buyer.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to put this is I can't come do your job right now.
No.
Right?
No.
For multitudes of reasons beyond just the licensing.
No offense,
and those
but I
things.
wouldn't want you to do.
Right. Exactly. I wouldn't want to do it for myself, much less, right? But just as much as I can't go do Chad's job, I can't go do your job. You can't come do mine either.
No.
It's that simple of a thing, right? Like I can do. I come from a contracting background. I fixed a lot of stuff in my own house. There's a lot of, let's say, plumbing I can fix. And then there's a line in the sand that I go, nope, got to call a plumber.
You're done. Yeah.
My dad's an electrician. There's a lot of electrical stuff I can fix. And then there's a point where I go, damn it, got to call the electrician. Right? And there's a reason that you can't do these, unless you do something every day. You can't do it. Why would you do it with one of the two most, I shouldn't even say one of the two most valuable things that occur in your life. And when I say that is because my girlfriend's a doula, by the way, so we'll work this in, is having a
Do you
baby
go ahead
and
plug
buying
her while you're at it?
Yeah, right. You reach out, I'll give you her information. But no, I mean, these are two of the most important things that happen in your life, and is
That's
having a
very
baby
true.
and buying a house.
That's
right?
very true. Yeah.
Like you want professionals on your side when you do those.
And like you
things.
brought up earlier, you want somebody that's there for you, that's backing you. You're not going to go to court and not be represented by somebody,
Right.
Because you're putting a lot on the line,
Right.
You know, this is the biggest transaction of your life, like you just said,
Right.
And you need somebody in your corner to help kind of navigate those waters.
Right. Right. I mean, I think it's totally the thing. And I'll go back to the birth doula example.
Go for it.
The reason people are hiring birth doulas, one is education and knowledge and how to, especially if you've never had a baby, like, oh my gosh, what is all of this? And what does this mean? And what is this symptom? And why am I feeling like this? And that person can explain all that. You know what they also do? They advocate for you when you're in the hospital, when it's all really going down. Do you think you're at your best in that moment?
Yeah.
Do you think you have all your faculties about you and you're thinking about every situation? No, but that birth doula is. It's the same exact conversation. When you are emotionally invested in buying this home or home, whatever
it is,
forever amount,
yeah.
Right? Do you always think you're making those decisions based on the best outlook for you? No, sometimes you've emotionally got yourself going in a direction and you're just willing to shell out another 10 grand where I'm the one going, whoa, whoa, let's not spend that money yet. There's another way to figure this out, right? So sometimes I'm trying to save you money. Sometimes I'm telling you, spend that next 10 grand or what's better over there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's somebody to help advocate for you and advise you into making the best decisions for yourself.
Yeah. I think that was a perfect place to end our conversation.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, hey, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today and the importance of the buyer agency and what it means to the transaction of real estate. We thank you again for taking the time to listen to us. Again, my name is Chad with District Home Loans. If you could, feel free to like and subscribe to our podcast. And, of course, we'll see you on the next video. John, thank you again for stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
Anytime.
absolutely. We should probably do a quick cheers, don't you think?
I think always.
Yeah.
There's always
Look
a reason
forward-
for a cheers.
Yeah. And, of course, we look forward to you coming back for
I'm
that
sure.
five-timer club.
You're damn right. I'm looking for my jacket. You guys got to figure this out.
We're going to figure something out for we'll have a little gift for you.
Oh, it's kind of like, it's like a smoking jacket, right?
Ooh, I don't know. We'll figure something out.
We got to look at SNL.
All right.
I want something similar.
All right, folks. Again, we appreciate it. Like and subscribe to us. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.